Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Comic Book Network. I'm your host, Batman.
I'm your co-host, Superman.
And I am a heck of a lot better looking. Ow. How could you? How dare you?
I struck you.
I know you did. It was so clear to me.
You know what else is clear to me, Batman?
What?
This week is the 10th episode. That's a fifth of the way through the year.
That's incredible. Did you do that all in your head?
I did do that all in my head.
That was so impressive that it knocked me right out of my Batman voice.
I suppose it did.
Tell me, do you bleed?
You will.
Yeah, in about 2 weeks. It looks like, ugh. And don't worry, that's not a bad joke or anything. We just plan to jump off a bridge in about 2 weeks.
Well, he does.
Yeah, a small bridge. Drawbridge.
Drawbridge, yeah.
Yeah, medieval times sort of thing. So today we're talking about Batman vs. Superman and whether it deserved all the unnecessary hate it got. We watched it yesterday night, and it was really enjoyable for me, but then again, everything was enjoyable because I had about 2 pounds of Sour Patch Kids. Do you hear that? Do you hear that cashier ring?
Ching.
That means I just made another 20 cents. That's right, folks. We've made it to our 10th episode, and we're finally adding plugs everywhere, anywhere, and something else involving where.
And Happy Easter.
Oh, thank you.
To everyone, not just you. You pretentious
okay.
fool.
Cool. We will alert you that this is going to be riddled with spoilers, so if you want to avoid those, I'd suggest going to about 15 minutes in. I think we can wrap it up by then if we go pretty quickly.
We should go 15:03.
15:03. All right. Tune in at 15:03 if you have yet to see the movie. All right, so first impressions.
I thought it was, everyone was telling me, oh, it's going to suck. When you go see it, it's going to be terrible.
Right. That was mostly me, because I was whispering into your ear for the last 5 days.
I was wondering who that was next to my bed.
It's subconscious, yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, so everyone was like, hyping it to be this terrible movie. And it's like any movie, when it gets hyped either way,
right?
It's usually not. It's usually not what everyone said.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a good movie. It was, a good 2-plot.
Right.
Weird transition.
Strange, yeah, definitely.
Strange. But the characters were definitely interesting.
The characters were great. How did you like Lex Luthor? He was one of the main controversial characters that we saw.
He was by far my favorite character because he was clever and manipulative. And given I may have a slight bias because Now You See Me was also a great movie.
Right.
It has,
and as you know, actor. Lex Luthor made a cameo in that movie as the horse.
Yeah. Anyways, but no, he's an actor from that movie, and in that movie, he was cool too. So, it was kind of
the transition.
Cool to see him again manipulative.
Now, I will say that some of his humor was a bit forced, I think, especially, force-feeding a Jolly Rancher to, what was it, a senator of some kind?
Something like that.
That was a little bit off the rails. It still seems like DC is having a little bit of trouble with their humorous side of things. And I'd say most of the humor that we saw on screen was also in the trailer. So there were very little.
Yeah, there wasn't very much humor in the movie. I thought it was more of a serious.
Which, don't get me wrong, yeah, it's totally fine. You wouldn't expect a movie about two heroes hitting each other to be just a friendly love fest, right?
Right.
Which it did become once they mentioned the word Martha.
Yeah, that.
That was about the lamest way to switch plot lines, I think. That's such a quick transition, and I know I shouldn't have been expecting a whole hour of Batman and Superman duking it out, but at least there could have been a little more build up in terms of the courtroom. I would have liked to see that whole scene just kind of play out more than it did, instead of getting stopped by a wheelie bomb.
I thought that was pretty funny, actually.
I thought it was good, but not as good as I'd like. I would have liked it to drag on a bit.
So for those of you who don't know, who skipped our spoiler warnings, Batman's beaten on Superman, right? And he's got him down, but then Superman, because his mom's been taken by Lex Luthor, so Superman's like, you need to save Martha, which is his mom's name.
Mm-hmm.
Coincidence, it's also Batman's mom's name, so Batman kind of stops beating on him, and he's like, huh, what happened?
Right.
Which then we bring in the psychic Lois Lane, who, even though she was Lois.
Is he a man now?
Yes.
These darn movies always changing our favorite beloved characters.
She's a psychic. She's out of the room. She doesn't even hear any of this. But then Batman's like, what name? What's that name mean, right? To Superman, because Superman's on the ground, but Superman's got his neck being choked, so he doesn't say it again. But Lewis comes in, and she knows.
And he says, I'm a man now, and it's really the biggest plot twist of the whole movie.
Anyways, she knows immediately what name it is. She's like, oh, that's his mother's name, even though she never heard it, which I thought was great. Second time she's a psychic, actually, is later on in the movie when Batman's like telling, what's his name? Alfred? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Alfred Pennyworth. Anyways.
He had a good portrayal.
He was alright. He was kind of old. Batman was telling Alfred that he needs to go back and get the staff. Lois is already on that. I mean, like, the second it just transfers and she's already trying to find it, which I thought was amazing.
Exactly. But she is a reporter, so then again, she's
used to reading Batman's mind.
But speaking of Batman, how did you like his portrayal? He looked a little bit off the rails, but you might expect that of a 20-year-old Batman, or 20 years into Batman.
Yeah, he was definitely much more violent and easy to kill someone.
Right.
You know?
I gotta say, I loved his scenes. Like, the car chase scene was one of the best I've seen in movies. And all of the action, really, hand-to-hand action, was fluid and more like the Arkham games. And I really liked that sort of idea.
Yeah, and the whole portrayal of him as being darker kind of worked for this.
Right.
For this movie.
Especially with the two clashing. I did like how they kept true to Superman's personality, and he was kind of holding back through the fight. And I think that was a good way of showing just how a fight would go without providing a definitive answer. That was a smart little workaround for him.
I don't know. You know, me being the one who always is like, yeah, Batman's gonna win, you know. I know it's cliche, but I chose Thanos anyways.
Right.
And, but I mean, Superman having that's just part of his personality.
Right, yeah.
And a personality is what helps you fight. So that could be a definitive answer, because if that's how he's going to fight, that's how he's going to fight, and he'll lose every time.
Yeah, but like I'm saying, it was a good workaround. For instead of doing power versus power purely, they decided to do more of a morals versus immorals, and that was or subjective immorality, I guess.
I do think that after the first couple attacks, Superman kind of let go, and he's like, gonna fight Batman.
Right. And then another thing I have to say about this movie is that the humor, like we touched on earlier, it was found in some of the weirdest places, like the flashback scene or flash forward actually, to the desert area was it was cool, but right after that, when the Flash is like shimmering through the computer consoles, I thought that was one of the most ridiculous scenes in the movie. And when Batman, at the beginning of the movie, starts flying encircled by bats, I thought that caused me to physically laugh out loud. Like, that's the level of ridiculousness that some of these scenes had.
Yeah, the movie was pretty long, like
Right.
2 hours or so.
2.5.
At least 2.5, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it really could have been cut down to 1.5, getting rid of some of those scenes, because we didn't need to see Batman's parents die again. That never played a role. We didn't need to see some blood come out of a coffin. That never played a role. We didn't need Flash to have that weird out of the computer cameo.
Right.
And
that brings up another thing, which is that a lot of this movie was universe building rather than focusing on what fans wanted to see. And I think what they wanted to see was the actual Batman versus Superman aspect. So much of this could have been done in a sort of Justice League type movie where they take out all of the Doomsday plot and the Death of Superman story, and they use...
Spoiler.
Right, well,
yeah.
If you're still here, it's your fault. Get it? No, but...
You done screwed up.
If they had just transitioned that to, like, a new movie instead, it would have been so much better, and they would have had so much better focus in the beginning, and it would have seemed a lot more driven towards one goal rather than driven towards this goal and this goal and this goal, right? You don't have to have so much universe building. I understand that it's essentially the first movie in this new franchise aside from Man of Steel.
Right.
But it was just too much. It feels like there should have been Batman versus Superman and Dawn of Justice rather than Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice. You feel?
Yeah, and also the cameos, I heard a lot like, oh, they're going to cameo all the Justice League. I don't know.
They did.
It was forced.
But it was very shoehorned in. Like, I can't think of a worse cameo than clicking different files on a computer screen. Now, Wonder Woman, she was great. That was... Every single time she entered a scene, like, you could see power just, like, radiating off of her. Like, the fight she had with Doomsday really exhibited how powerful she is, and it was great to see.
Yeah, I definitely thought that her part was done well.
Yeah, though I still would have liked to see maybe her develop just a little bit more, but in a separate movie. And a lot of the reason that this movie suffered was that it was catered towards comic book fans who are used to that sort of fast-paced action, scene switching randomly.
Yeah.
Almost providing no real substance between each scene to transition them. Except it didn't have the narration that we get to benefit from as comic book readers. So it had most of the elements of comics without that added bonus of narration, and that made it a bit difficult to follow.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. But I do think that the movie would be better if you had seen Man of Steel already, and I'll touch on it in my reads of the week. But I also read the Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice prequels, which are a series of comics, and they kind of gave more reasoning.
Right, and that's good, but you've got to remember these are two separate media forms, and you have to treat them as independent. You can have the tie-ins, but they should be able to stand on their own as works of media.
So we're approaching 15:03 here, so I'm just going to let everyone know in a couple of seconds here that Batman wins, just so that, and
totally wrong.
Batman wins.
All right. So now that everyone's back who was gone from the spoilers, we're just going to give a quick 1 to 10 rating of this movie. What would yours be?
I'm going to have to go with a 7.
Okay.
Because it was a good movie, but not the best it could have been.
Should watch or shouldn't?
Definitely should watch.
Okay.
Definitely.
I'll give it a high 7 or a low 8 because I did definitely enjoy it, and I think I benefited from having known some of the special little Easter eggs in there, and that was enjoyable to watch. And definitely should watch despite what the critics say. So we'll move in now to our reads of the week. As you touched on before, you read the Dawn of Justice
I read Batman
prequels.
vs. Superman Dawn of Justice prequels.
Right.
There's 6 of them. And reading them, gave you more of an understanding. I thought they were great. I'm not going to dive too much into them because they may contain some spoilers. But yeah, it was interesting, Like, there were criminals who were, now scared of Batman. Like, he hasn't always been this way, they were saying, And so I thought that was a good to kind of just lay a foundation. And another thing I really liked is that the comic book people looked like the actors in the film.
Yeah, that's definitely a good thing about the tie-ins. Like, with Flash and Arrow's tie-ins, too, they definitely look more similar to their show or film counterparts. For my read of the week, I read several all new, all different titles, but the one that I really enjoyed this week was Bedlam, which is from Image, and I read the first volume that was 7 issues or 7 chapters long, and it went over the story of a serial killer who no longer was in its serial killer persona. He's kind of reformed in a way, and his brain is wired so that he can no longer kill. But he still has this obsession with violence, and that is what really sets a foundation for his character, because he becomes obsessed with solving these crimes that are going around, and since he has the unique perspective of a serial killer, he can fully immerse himself into this role as a detective because he knows everything about it, and he still wants to satisfy that hunger for violence.
And what is this called?
Bedlam.
Bedlam.
Yeah, it's
Bedlam.
It's a word for pretty much insane.
Yeah.
And it's also the name of the town that he operates in. One of the cool things I like about it is the coloring. It's very simple. It's a lot of it's just black, white, and red, but it varies through each scene, and you can see kind of the red tinted main character, which draws back to his serial killer origin, and they do a lot to tie that together, and I think that's
symbolic
cool
colors.
Idea. Right. All right. Now, if there's no objections, we're gonna read.
I object. All right, move on.
10 minutes of radio silence just there because you objected. I'd like to let you know what you've done. We're gonna move on to our letter of the week, and wouldn't you know it? For our 10th episode, we actually have a letter this week. But before we read it, thank you. But before we read it, I actually wrote it, so you may not do any more clapping, actually. Okay? You directly defied me. You're out of here. You're fired. Of course we have to fire someone.
Fired again. Oh, shoot.
But before we get to this letter that was not actually written by me, just to be clear, we're going to tell you how you can send in your very own letter. Now, either send it directly to us at thecomicbooknetwork@gmail.com, which is TheComic.
No, wrong. You screwed up.
Oh, no. Hold on. One more try. TheComicBookNetwork.
No spaces.
Yes, at gmail.com. I thought I had it. I went too fast. I flew too close to the sun, and now I'm burning for it. Or you may go to the Comic Book Network .weebly.com, which is our website, which hosts these episodes each week. You can find all of our episodes there, and as well as a direct link to each one of our social media pages. But what you can also find there is a form wherein you can submit a letter directly, and this is probably the easiest way to do it, because you just have to put in your name real quick, you have to put in your email, and you put in your quick comments, and then you send it off, and it'll be with us in a moment.
And it can be read on the show.
All right.
If you do have, just on another note, something I don't think we've mentioned, if you have like personal questions, like just for us, don't need them answered on the show, we both have an iFunny, so you can just let us know on that.
And we will read it on the show just to mock you. All right, so would you like to give me a name so that we can keep this emailer's anonymous?
We've already used Thanos.
Right.
Thanos.
Okay, that's a good one. So this one comes from Thanos. Hello.
Good name.
Hello, guys.
Assuming we're both guys.
I am a male. Are you a male?
I'm not admitting to anything without my lawyer present.
Lewis? Are you male? I was wondering, what did you guys think of the Civil War comic? It's acclaimed, but I thought it was more decent than great. Also, what do you guys think of how they are changing the original material to fit the MCU version? It's a pretty big change considering the smaller amount of characters and complete change in conflict. So, I'll go to you first. What do you think about the Civil War comic?
He's Thanos.
Right.
Thanos is right on the dot. I'm right with him because, I read them a couple of weeks back. I think it was episode 1 or 2.
Right.
Had my read of the week about them. You can check that out if you want. But I thought they were okay, but I didn't think they were anything special, Mm-hmm. They weren't better, really, than any other comic I've read, I think, though, that like Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, the Civil War is a lot better if you read the prologues and the backstory.
Right. Exactly. And that was a point I was going to try to make. The Civil War storyline by itself is good. It's not spectacular. But when you see it influence all of the different characters and all of the different storylines that are going on with said characters, it really brings a new meaning to it. And you can see just how much the war affected them. And I think that's what interests me personally about even historical wars. I don't get interested in the whole battle so much as what happens with the individual soldiers within that battle.
The cause isn't, the cause isn't what's interesting, it's the effect.
And it can be a little bit interesting, but not so much as delving into why this happened and how it affects every one of the people.
Yeah.
Right, so I would agree with you. It's decent, but it could be great if you allow yourself to get kind of immersed in that world. So the second aspect of his email is, what do you think of how they're changing the original material to fit the MCU version? Now, we know that there's very few characters, maybe 6 or 7 on each side, and the conflict is supposedly based around Bucky. I'm not quite sure the full scope of that, but Bucky and Crossbones and maybe Baron Zemo are told to be at the center of this action. So what do you think about that change and how it'll affect the movie?
You know, in the comics, they had like huge sides, huge.
Right.
And that worked for the comics, but I'm not sure if, all of them will work for the movie because
Right.
a giant war with a bunch of superheroes is going to be chaotic, and
Right.
I don't know if it'll be able to convey the same meaning as comic books.
And I want to tie this back to my answer for the first question, which is the thing that makes Civil War interesting is that the small amount, or is that the characters make up the Civil War, and the stories of their perspectives really make up the Civil War and make it matter. They make it less, or they make it more than decent. They make it great when you hear these characters' storylines, and I think reducing the size and the amount of the characters allows us to better develop each character.
Yeah, that way we can put more focus on each of them.
Exactly.
And that'll be helpful. And
we can,
I don't know if on another note, I don't know if it'll be if it will have as big of an effect. Impact. That too. Because there's so little of them.
Right.
But I think it'll still work for the movie.
Right, because that allows it to take it to a more personal level.
Right.
And the change in conflict, I think, was smart as well. As long as they keep the tone, it'll be fine. But it would be so much more effort and so much more unnecessary work to add Speedball and his whole group and to show this conflict that's true to the comics. It's less work, and I think more of an impact when you see that one of the characters is the one who's instigating this whole thing. You feel it on a more personal level again, and I think that'll really cement the tone.
So that's all I have to say.
Yep,
that's... So thank you, Thanos, again for your question. It
Absolutely.
was good. We always appreciate emails.
Mm-hmm.
And so next week's episode, we're gonna have to ask you guys for some things because we were thinking about having two characters. We're gonna discuss it. Like we just saw Batman versus Superman, so in the mood, you guys are gonna suggest to us like, which two characters do you think would be an interesting fight? We'll both pick a side and discuss why we think they would win. And so leave your characters.
Just as a forewarning, we may not be the best and we may not be the definitive answer, but we'll give our opinions based on the research that we do over the week.
Yeah, we'll try to do some research. So just leave your answers in the comments or really
the YouTube
anywhere.
Comments, Spreaker even has a commenting system, or when we post this on iFunny, you should be able to find that as well. Or even in an email.
An email works
along
too.
with the question of the week. All right, so
we'll pick our favorite, maybe do even two possibly, depending on how much time we have.
So remember, you can find us on YouTube, Spreaker, or our website, all at the Comic Book Network. Remember to email in with your questions or comments, and thank you guys for watching, listening.
Yeah, have a great Easter, and have a great week.
All right.
Bye.